Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a long time since I last posted. Long story short, I basically had a video go viral on TikTok, and within a matter of a week I had hundreds of orders that I needed to complete and get shipped out to customers. So I'm so sorry that I have been MIA, but I am back. I am all caught up. So today I just wanted to talk to you guys about car freshies. This will be my part 3 car freshie video. This is part 3, and I just want to go over some frequently asked questions and share some tips and tricks with you guys and maybe help you guys avoid some problems that you may be having with your car freshies. So without further ado, I have my part 1 video pulled up here on my phone, and I'm going to read off some comments that I think are some good questions. So I get asked these 2 same questions almost every single day. One of the questions is, where do you get your sealed bags from? So if you watched my first car freshie video, I put my car freshies in these cute holographic foil bags. You cannot smell the freshie through the bag unless it's open. If you click below on the description of the video, I always link the supplies that I use. I get those bags from Amazon. I'll go ahead and link all of these supplies in my description below, so be sure to check that out. And the second most frequently asked question that I get is something along the lines of, help, my car freshies are stuck, how can I pop them out? That is probably my most asked question, and there's 3 things that you can do to help with this. So first thing, before you pour in your beads into your cookie cutter on the baking sheet, spray some Pam or other type of cooking spray on the inside of your cookie cutters, just a little bit. You don't need to drown them. That has helped me tremendously. I also recommend that when you take them out of the oven, leave them on the stove and let them cool completely down. I'm talking room temperature, not warm. Let them cool completely down, because the beads will shrink a tiny bit and sometimes they will pull away from the cookie cutter by themselves. So if you're still having trouble after you've used the cooking spray and you've let them cool all the way, if you throw them in the freezer and let them freeze completely and then pull them out, sometimes they're a little bit easier to pop out. It's similar to when you're popping out ice cubes from an ice cube tray. They'll just crack off the sides a little bit more easily. So this question is, when someone hangs it in their car, will it melt from the heat? The answer is it could, but it shouldn't. I personally have never had a customer message me and say that their freshie melted, and I have shipped freshies all the way from Arizona to Australia. I used to live in Florida and it got really hot and humid there. So I would assume if it didn't melt in those places, then they should be okay. I have seen people where, you know, those little visors that you can put in your windshield to block the sun from coming into your car. Someone put their visor in their windshield and the freshie got caught in between the windshield and the visor, and it melted all over their visor. I think just because it was really close to the windshield that is obviously hot, baking in the sun. But like I said, that's never happened to mine, but I have seen other people complain about that. So I always just mention, make sure you hang in your mirror. Don't let it get caught in between your visor and the windshield. Don't lay it flat on a surface. So this next question is basically, this person is just asking for advice because she said that she followed all my steps. She put her oven at 300 degrees and they didn't melt down to the same consistency as yours, and she was scared to overbake them. So every oven varies. I set my oven to 300 and I bake them anywhere from 10 minutes to 15 minutes. It really depends on the cookie cutter I'm using. It depends on how thick that freshie is going to be, how much I filled up that cookie cutter with beads, but it really does depend on your oven, the way it cooks, but a lot of factors can go into this. So this is a really good question. So this person asked, do you recommend the powders rather than the liquid? So she's talking about when you color the freshies, you can either use candle dye or you can use mica pigment powder. I hate candle dye. I only used it one time and I hated it. Maybe I was doing something wrong. Maybe I didn't buy good quality candle dye. I'm not sure, but I definitely recommend using the mica pigment powders. Personally, I think they're cheaper and a little bit goes a long way, so you get the most bang for your buck. Okay, so here's another good question. This person asked, after you make the Freshie completely and you put it into your bags, how long does it last in the bag? Do they need to be used pretty quickly? I would recommend using them as soon as you can, but a lot of my customers are buying these for birthday gifts or Christmas gifts or whatever, and they are buying them ahead of time. So in my opinion, I think it really just depends on the scent that you're getting, how strong it is, the size of the Freshie that you're getting. When I first started and I wasn't selling out of car Freshies left and right, I would have a car Freshie in one of my smell-proof sealed bags, and it would be on the shelf for like 2 months, and I would just give it away to a friend, or I'd just put it in my car. I wasn't comfortable selling a car Freshie that I thought wasn't going to be as strong as it was when I made it, so I just kept it for myself, or I just gave it away for free to like my family or friends, and my car still smelled amazing for weeks. So I think it really just depends on how you store them, what kind of bags you're putting them in. I will also note that my car Freshies are in smell-proof bags, and those bags go into airtight sealed containers until they are sold. Typically, I have the beads already fragranced and ready to bake, and I make the car Freshies to order. But sometimes if it's a really popular design and I know I'm gonna sell that scent, I'll go ahead and do a large batch. So it really just depends on how well you store them and how strong your Freshies are. But I would say that they could last anywhere for a month to 2 months. So this person said, I've been doing mine pretty much the same way, and mine stopped smelling after a couple of weeks. So the car Freshies only last 2 to 8 weeks in your car, depending on the size and the scent and how strong it is. And also your climate plays a huge role in how long your car Freshies will last. So if you are shipping your car Freshies to a really hot state, obviously they're not gonna last as long. Because it's hotter, it's more humid, and the sun/heat really drains out that scent faster. So just keep that in mind when you are selling car Freshies in the South, or you're shipping your car Freshies to places that are hotter. Okay, so here is another really good question. So this person said, how do I get rid of the vinegar smell from my beads? I've used more than 2 ounces of fragrance oil and they're still pretty strong. So some people may not have experienced this, but there are a lot of companies out there that don't air out their beads before they ship them. The beads that I order are not aired out ahead of time, so when I get them, they have a smell that's similar to Elmer's glue or like a faint vinegar smell. And I would recommend not scenting your beads until you've gotten rid of that smell, because you can use as much fragrance oil as you want. That smell is not going to go away, because that is what those beads originally smell like. Whenever I buy my beads, I typically buy beads in 25-pound bags. I immediately, as soon as I open it, I pour the beads into a really big Rubbermaid container, and I will leave the lid off of them, and I will put that box in another room by itself, and they can completely air out so that I can scent them. I think a week is the longest that I've had to air out beads, so just keep that in mind whenever you are ordering your beads. Don't scent them until you get that smell off of them. Okay, so here is another really good question. This person asked, is it possible to pigment the beads after they are already scented? I've heard a lot of other people that make these Freshies pigment their beads afterwards, and I cringe at the idea because I've tried it and I hate it. I won't do it. I can't do it. No. I saved the one that I did to show you guys. So this is a perfect Freshie that I did how I normally do it. I pour the beads in, I pour my mica pigment powder in, and then I pour the fragrance oil in. I let it set for 2 days, and then I bake it. This is what your Freshie is supposed to look like. Now, I did one where I fragranced the beads and then I added the pigment powder after the beads have already absorbed the fragrance oil. And I didn't even like put a string in this one or pull out the nail, just because I just wanted to show you guys. So this is how it came out. So yes, I think the pigment is better looking in the one where I added the pigment afterwards, but only because the beads aren't absorbing the pigment like it would if you poured in with the fragrance oil. I can rub this Freshie as much as I want. I'm not gonna have pink or white or brown on my fingers at all. But this one, yes, the beads are more pigmented, but what you guys aren't seeing, and I'm gonna try to zoom in, but I don't know how this is gonna look on camera. So I don't think you guys can really see that, but there is like a white dust on top of these beads and I can't scrub it off, and it does come off. So if I keep rubbing this nose, first of all, the beads will fall off. Like, they don't bake correctly. And I don't know if you can see my finger, but I have this pink powder all over my finger. So when you pigment the beads after they've already absorbed the fragrance oil, you're basically just pouring the pigment on top of them, and the beads are not absorbing the coloring at all. So it's just setting on top of the beads. So what I noticed is I had to bake this one like 10 minutes longer than I baked this one. Because the beads are coated in this powder, they aren't sticking together and the beads just fall off. Like, I barely have to touch it and it's like, it just like falls apart. I have like beads like all over my table right now. But anyway, so I just wanted to show you guys that. So I personally wouldn't want to send this to a customer and then every time the customer touches it, they have the pigment all over their fingers and it has like these little white specks because it just didn't bake right, and it deteriorates every time you touch it because the beads aren't completely cured together. So that is why I recommend always coloring your beads when you do the fragrance oil, not afterwards, because they just don't compare. Okay, so this person asked, how do you know when to take them out and if they're completely done? She said that she has them in the oven for 10 to 15 minutes, but doesn't know if they are done all the way. So I can always tell when mine are done because when I'm looking at them on the pan, they will look almost like they're wet or glossy, and you can kind of tell that the beads are sticking together. Now, if your beads start to look like they are melting down to where they are starting to get smooth, you're baking them too long. You still want your Freshie to have this texture. You should be able to see every individual bead, but as long as your Freshies look like they're glossy or kind of wet, your beads are melting and they should be sticking together and you can pull them out. I have another really good question here. So this person says that she has a problem with hers melting and running underneath the cookie cutters when I put them in the oven. So this is because whenever you pop out your Freshies, sometimes you might bend your cookie cutters just a little bit, giving them that tough loving that they sometimes need, and you're not bending your cookie cutters back to the original shape. I am definitely guilty of this. We all do it. The trick that I do to fix this problem is if I pull out my Freshies and I see that some of the beads have melted underneath the cookie cutter, I immediately, as soon as I take them out of the oven, I grab a toothpick and like a napkin, and I will run the toothpick around the outside of the cookie cutter until I have pulled away all of the melted beads, and then I will just wipe it on a napkin real quick, and then I'll just keep going. If you don't do that, then you will have to trim your car Freshie. So I just recommend using that toothpick trick when you can to avoid having to trim down your Freshies later. So this person said that her beads haven't absorbed all of the fragrance oil and she keeps shaking them, and they've been sitting in the jars for 2 weeks and they haven't absorbed the oil yet. So for that, I would recommend, if you're using a jar like this and you've already filled your jar up all the way, sometimes if you pour them into a jar and you have more air in the jar, they will cure faster because it has more air to work with. So you could pour these into a bigger jar or a bigger container so that has more air and give it time. If the jar wasn't filled all the way and it still wasn't absorbing all the fragrance oil, I would suggest adding more beads to it and then shake it and then leave it setting for 2 days and see if that helps. So it is trial and error. I've done that a bunch of times where I thought, oh, this scent isn't as strong and I'm gonna add some more fragrance oil to that jar, and then the beads don't fully absorb all the fragrance oil, and I've had to add more beads to compensate for that extra oil in there. This person asked, do the fragrance oils leave your oven smelling like the fragrance? That's the last thing I want, is fragrance scented chicken. I actually get asked that question a lot, and my kitchen will smell like whatever scent I just baked, but the oven doesn't have that smell. So just like when you bake like a casserole in the oven or something, as soon as you pull that casserole out, your oven doesn't smell like what you just baked, but your kitchen has that smell because the aroma has just drifted all over the kitchen. So it's the same thing. So that can be a good or a bad thing depending on if you like the scent that you're baking. But I've never had an issue with my oven keeping that scent in. All right guys, so hopefully you learned a thing or two in me answering some of these frequently asked questions where we all have some of the same problems, and now you can avoid some of those with some of these tips and tricks. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to click that subscribe button below so you don't miss out on any other crafting tutorials.